is the hottest part of July. The thermometer on the bedroom wall reads 86 degrees at 3 in the afternoon, and the room feels like the inside of a car parked in the sun. You take 2 frozen water bottles out of the freezer, strap them behind a small, oscillating fan with a couple of zip ties, and turn it on. Within 5 minutes, the thermometer had already started dropping. Over the next several minutes, it settled into the low 70s during my test. No air conditioner, no expensive machine, just a fan you already own, 2 bottles you were about to throw in the recycling, and one small salt trick almost nobody talks about anymore. And here's the part that actually gets me. This isn't some brand new hack somebody discovered last week. My grandmother was doing this exact thing back in the 70s and 80s, long before air conditioning became common in everyday homes. This isn't a gimmick. It's how an entire generation got through summer, and somehow almost nobody under 40 has ever heard of it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why this works. Not just that it works, the salt trick that helps the cold last noticeably longer, the rotation method that turns a several-hour fix into something you can run all day, a bigger version for a whole living room, how to build the whole thing even if you don't own a single zip tie, and the honest truth about what this can and cannot do. Stick around to the end, because there's one small trick involving peppermint oil that sounds a little silly until you actually try it. Let's start with the part almost everyone gets backwards. Why a fan alone does nothing. Here's something almost nobody explains correctly, and once you understand it, you'll never think about a fan the same way again. A plain fan does not lower the temperature of a room, not by 1 degree. All it does is move air around. The reason a fan feels good on your skin is that moving air speeds up the sweat evaporating off you, and that evaporation is what pulls heat away from your body. Don't take my word for it. Leave a fan running in an empty room and come back an hour later with a thermometer. Same temperature, sometimes a hair warmer, since the motor itself gives off a small amount of heat while it runs. The fan was never cooling the room. It was cooling you and quietly not telling you the difference. That's not a knock on fans. They're doing exactly what they're built to do. It's just not the same job as an air conditioner. And once you separate those two things in your head, the rest of this video makes a lot more sense. Now put a block of ice directly in that airstream, and the situation changes. The air being pushed across those frozen bottles dumps some of its heat into the cold surface as it passes through. That's a real, physical transfer of heat out of the air, not just a trick on your skin. Your fan is suddenly doing 2 jobs at once, still speeding up evaporation off your body, but now also pulling warm air across something freezing and shedding a bit of heat on every single pass. There's a second thing happening here that almost nobody points out, and it might be the more useful half of the trick. The surface of that frozen bottle sits well below the dew point of your room, so the moisture already floating invisibly in your air starts condensing directly onto the cold plastic, the same way a glass of ice water sweats on a humid afternoon. That dripping under the fan isn't a leak. That water is coming straight out of your room's air. You're dehumidifying the room at the same time you're cooling it, and lower humidity means your own sweat evaporates faster, which means the room can feel cooler than the number on the thermometer suggests. The salt trick nobody tells you. This is the part most people never hear, and it's the same principle behind why we salt icy roads in winter. Plain water freezes at 32 degrees, and the moment it starts melting, it climbs right back toward 32 and keeps warming steadily from there. Add a 1/4 cup of regular table salt to the water before you freeze it, and the chemistry works in your favor. Salt lowers the freezing point of water, a principle called freezing point depression, helping the ice remain effective for longer as it melts instead of warming back up right away the way plain ice does. I want to be precise about what this actually does, because it's easy to oversell. It does not create extra cold out of nowhere. It simply helps the bottles stay colder for longer as they melt, instead of warming up right away the way plain ice does. In my own home tests, salted bottles stayed noticeably colder longer than plain water bottles, often extending the useful cooling time by several hours. Your results will depend on your room, your climate, and your freezer, so treat these as a starting point, not a guarantee. There's a right amount here, so don't get creative with it. Use less salt and you barely notice a difference. Use much more, 1/3 of a cup or beyond, And your home freezer may not get cold enough to freeze it solid, and you'll end up with slush instead of a proper ice block. A quarter cup per 1 liter bottle is the amount that consistently worked in my testing. Building it step by step, even without zip ties. Here's exactly what you need. 1 oscillating fan, standing or table size, with a removable front grill. 2 1-liter plastic bottles, sports drink bottles, or plain water bottles both work fine. A quarter cup of table salt per bottle, and something to attach the bottles to the back of the fan. Zip ties are the easiest option, 2 to 4 per bottle. But if you don't have any, don't go buy some just for this. A picture hanger works. A bent paper clip works. A bread tie from a loaf in your kitchen works. Even a short length of cotton rope tied snugly holds a bottle in place just fine. The attachment method genuinely doesn't matter. What matters is that the bottle sits securely behind the fan without touching the spinning blades. Fill each bottle with water, leaving about an inch of headspace at the top, since water expands as it freezes and a bottle filled to the cap can crack in the freezer. Add the quarter cup of salt, cap it tightly, and shake it hard for 2 to 3 minutes until the salt is fully dissolved, no crystals left sitting at the bottom. Freeze overnight. 12 to 18 hours is a safe window, since salt water takes a little longer to freeze solid than plain water. Remove the front grill of the fan. Always unplug it first before touching anything. Position the 2 frozen bottles upside down behind the fan, narrow neck pointing down, wide base pointing up, which keeps them centered instead of tipping forward. Secure them to the vent slots or wire frame on the back using whatever attachment method you've got. Make sure the bottles don't touch the spinning blade, and check that the fan can still oscillate freely once they're attached. Reattach the front grill, slide a towel underneath to catch condensation, and turn it on. The rotation upgrade. Here's where this stops being a one-time fix and becomes something you can run all day. A single pair of bottles give you several hours of real cooling before they've melted through. Here's the upgrade. Freeze 2 pairs of bottles instead of 1. While 1 pair works on the fan, the second pair sits in the freezer refreezing. Swap them every few hours, and the cold basically never stops. One small bonus on top of that. Don't pour the melted water down the drain in the morning. That water is already chilled, so it takes noticeably less energy for your freezer to refreeze it compared to starting with room temperature tap water straight from the sink. Scaling it up for a bigger room. 2 bottles on a standing fan is enough for a bedroom or small office. For a living room, a larger open space, or a power outage where you need broader coverage, a box fan can hold 4 frozen bottles instead of 2, draped over the top edge on both sides rather than zip-tied behind it. Air pulls through one side across the cold bottles and pushes out the other, roughly doubling the cold contact surface compared to the standing fan version. In testing, for properly frozen saltwater bottles on a box fan delivered noticeably longer coverage than the 2-bottle setup, which makes this the version worth knowing for an extended power outage or a multi-day heat wave. Same salt ratio, same headspace rule, same towel underneath, just doubled. The honest scope. I want to be straight with you here, because overselling this helps nobody. What this setup genuinely does, it cools a single room, roughly bedroom or living room sized, by a meaningful, noticeable amount for several hours per pair of frozen bottles, at essentially zero ongoing cost beyond the small amount of electricity a fan already uses. What it does not do, it will not cool an entire house at once. It will not match the raw output of a window air conditioner. It is not built for continuous, unattended 24-hour cooling without the rotation method. This is a targeted fix for one room, during the hours you actually need it, a bedroom before sleep, a home office in the afternoon, or any room at all during a power outage when running anything bigger simply isn't an option. Why almost nobody's told you this? A window air conditioner runs $200 to $500 to buy, plus another $30 to $50 a month in electricity through peak summer. This setup, if you already own a fan, costs $0, and even a small fan bought new only runs $20 to $40 one time. A window AC also pulls 8 to 15 amps of continuous current, a real strain if you're running on solar or battery power. A small oscillating fan draws under 1 amp. Simple, low-cost solutions like this one are easy to overlook, mostly because they're not the kind of thing anyone can sell you. A company can build and market a machine. It's a lot harder to sell someone 2 bottles they already own and a bag of table salt that costs a couple of dollars and lasts all summer. That's really the whole reason this stays quiet in older farmhouses and off-grid homes, while most families keep paying every month for a version with a bill attached. Quick answers before you go. A few things people always ask. Will this make my room too humid? No, in a normal single-room setup, you're pulling moisture out of the air, not adding it. Can I run this overnight? Yes, especially using the rotation method, though a single pair of bottles will likely run dry at some point before morning depending on your room. Do I need an expensive fan? No. Any basic oscillating fan with a removable front grill works the same as a pricier one. The bonus trick: take that towel underneath the fan, catching condensation, and add a few drops of peppermint or eucalyptus oil to it. This does nothing to the actual temperature of the room, but menthol trips the cold receptors on your skin, the same reason mint gum feels cool in your mouth, so the room can feel a little cooler than it actually measures. It costs pennies, it's completely optional, and it's a small, satisfying finishing touch. What to do tonight? Find a fan you already own. Save 2 1-liter bottles from something you've already bought this week. Fill them. Add a 1/4 cup of salt to each. Shake until dissolved, and freeze overnight. Tomorrow, during the hottest part of the day, strap them to the back of your fan with whatever you've got on hand. Place a towel underneath and turn it on. Measure your room with any cheap thermometer before and after, and tell me your numbers in the comments, along with which room in your house runs the hottest. And if your grandparents had their own version of this, a wet cloth on a fan, a bowl of ice in front of one, some trick with salt nobody ever wrote down, tell me that story too. That's exactly the kind of knowledge this channel exists to dig back up. Subscribe if you want more of it. Stay cool, stay curious, and go save those 2 bottles before you throw them out.